first off, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate everyone being here. We're just going to introduce ourselves, though I know there's been a lot of mingling going on and everyone got here because everybody kind of knew somebody. So I'm Shani Smith. This is DK Smith. So DK's background is as a finance attorney who used to work for Goldman Sachs, BCG, NYU Law, University of Miami undergrad. He's done a lot of stuff. I am a mere physician. As you can see, I went to Xavier University. I had to wear my little cardigan because I was feeling HBCU love today, and it's yellow and it's gross outside. So I went to Xavier University undergrad, went to med school at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, business school at St. Joseph's University, and I am a board certified critical care physician. So DK and I formed a wonderful company that its baseline is a strategy advisory company, but what we do on the side every month for free is we try to meet with like-minded, we like to say urban professionals, but we like to refer to basically people of color within our community. And we like to educate ourselves on financial topics. Today, what we're going to talk about, so we ended last month talking about stocks, okay? Each month, like I said, has been a different topic. So we want to finish talking about stocks, ETFs, and really go into bonds, and then start talking about debt management. Most of us here have been to college or professional school, and we have accrued a significant amount of debt. And oftentimes we have been told the wonderful, beautiful fallacy that there is such a thing as good debt. And that is a damn lie. But they like to tell you that because they want you to go to school and take out those loans. So we're going to start talking about all that, and probably next month in October, we'll be finishing up talking about debt because that's going to take a long time. But let's talk about ETFs a little bit more in stocks. We started talking about how do you know what's a good stock, what's a bad stock, how do you even know what to invest in? I just read a lot. He gets to play with people who have millions of dollars on a daily basis with this stuff all the time. And so that's how he and I connected. So what would you like to add to that since I'm finished running my mouth?
No, I think you hit pretty much everything. Only thing I would add is that this is an interactive session. This is not like I'm not trying to preach or lecture at anyone. This is more so a conversation and a dialogue. I want to talk about what's top of mind for you all. Like, what are you interested in? What kind of questions do you have? This is like I hate the phrase safe space. It's a safe space for like financial, like topics, you know what I mean? So literally you say, hey, what even is a stock? Like that, you ask that here, right? And that's what I'm here to help with. Shani's going to be asking me a lot of questions. We have some questions pre-planned.
I ask him questions every day.
So if you guys have anything to add, please just speak out, raise your hand or whatever. Like this is very informal. I'm not going to cut me off, and please stop me if I'm talking over anyone's head. If I use an acronym and say something, just say, hey, slow down, bro. Like, what does that mean?
Yes.
Because I don't know what's important, or what's like top of mind for everyone else, and I want to make sure that I'm like hitting on everything and making sure you guys leave here with not just like things that are not just like more knowledge, but actionable, tangible things you can implement in your everyday life that will get you that much closer to building generational wealth and passing this lesson on to the next person.
Right.
Go ahead and start us off.
Yeah.
So, two-part question.
Yeah.
What exactly is a stock?
Yeah.
And what separates people that do well in the market from people that have no idea what they're doing?
Yeah. So, all right. So the first question is, what exactly is a stock? Right? So a stock, when you buy a stock, let's say you buy a stock in Walmart, you literally own a piece of Walmart. So like you own a small sliver. Now you own like 1 millionth or something, but you do own Walmart, right? And so your financial performance is tied to the future earnings of Walmart. And so anytime you buy a stock, let's say you want to buy Beyond Meat or something, you literally own a piece of that company. The larger institutional investors, they buy blocks of stock. So they may buy hundreds of thousands of shares in one time, and that may accrue, that may come out down to 1 or 2% of a company, and that costs 40, 50, 100, $200 million. But those are kind of the moves that go on Wall Street, and which gets to your second question, right? What separates the kind of the novices from the professionals? It's that. It's the amount of capital you can inject to actually buy a stock, and you can't legally buy a stock to manipulate the price, but you can buy a stock and it will affect the price. All right, and so knowing, put it this way, if you run a hedge fund and your hedge fund has billions of dollars, you can go get a meeting with any CEO.
What's a hedge fund?
Yes. A hedge fund, for simplicity's sake, a hedge fund is a company that manages money and buys and sells stocks. And so let's say, let's say I start a hedge fund, right? And I go and get $1 billion from all my friends and from pension funds and everything, and say, okay, I'm going to deploy this $1 billion. I'm going to buy it in the top, 100 companies in America. And so I'll go to each CEO and I would meet with them and say, hey, I have $1 billion to spend. I want to buy some of your stock. And then of course CEO, in their mind, if you buy a stock, if anyone buys a stock, typically the stock price rises, so it's in their best interest for people to buy more of their stocks. So they go and they say, okay, I'll tell you what our plans are. I'll give you robust information into the inner workings of our companies. And so they can't legally tell them material, non-public information, which is MNPI. But imagine you doing research on yahoo.com versus somebody doing research with a CEO sitting next to them.
Right.
And that's the difference between the professionals and the...
So they get the in earlier than you or I get. So they know whose stock is going down and whose stock is going up sooner than any of us here. So they'll have an idea of what would be a better company to invest in, whereas we might be doing all of our research on Google or Yahoo or Bing, I don't know.
Right. And then they have a lot more resources. They have research analysts, they have software, they have algorithms, and a lot of technology at their disposal. And it's kind of an unfair advantage they have, but
it's legal.
It's just kind of the way it is, and so that's why, which kind of segues into ETFs, and we'll hit on that in a minute. That's why it's better to buy a basket of stocks than just one individual stock that sort of spreads your risk out a little bit. That answer the question?
Yep.
Awesome.
Okay, I got it then. So a friend of mine was telling me, like here in Chicago with Cresco, the cannabis, the marijuana cannabis here, they're selling stocks at like $7 a stock. Right?
Just share.
$7 a share. And he was like, yeah, they projected to be like, 3 to 5 years down the line, like $85 a share. Then, so that's why they say get it now, it's cheap, and
invest now is going to rise.
Right. But even just going off of what you just said about not just investing in one thing, but like putting your money in a lot of different things. So say for instance, I'm just using some Chicago companies that I would know. Like if I said, all right, I got $1,500 that I want to invest in stocks, and I want to spread them out amongst McDonald's, Google, Cresco, and maybe some other things. Is that wise going in at such a small percentage just to have some stocks in something? Like how do you find out
what's the minimum, right?
And are there any stipulations? Like, do they need to know where does my money come from?
They don't need to know none of that.
Okay, but
they just want your money.
Is Cresco publicly traded? It is? Okay, all right. So that's important because if it's not publicly traded, then they would ask you where your money coming from. Then you have to be a qualified investor. Something called a qualified investor. I think you have to have I don't know if it's $1 or $2 million liquid, meaning in the bank, and or be making at least $250,000 for the last 2 years. And that's like a qualified investor, because that means the government's now saying, okay, this person, if they're making that much money, then they know what they're talking about. Which is kind of BS, because we don't know, you can come into this money and still not know. But the theory is, if you have that much money, you can at least hire somebody to help you out. Right? Because they don't want imagine if Cresco was private, right? And then they just going around the hood saying, hey, buy a weed stock, cool, and then just get everybody just to give them money. That could be a terrible stock, right? And so that's why it's important to only be a qualified investor when it's private. Now, when it's public, technically information is available to everyone and every shareholder and every potential shareholder. So then now it's on you. The onus is on you to do your research, which is why there's no qualified investor rule, because they want to open it up to the public. Now, your larger question, which was, is there a minimum amount that you should be investing with? The answer is Absolutely no, not. Like if you have $500, put it into the markets, because studies have shown and research shows that the earlier you put money into the markets, the better you're going to do over the long run. Because we're not talking about buying Cresco today, selling it next year. We're talking about buying Cresco today and giving Cresco to your kids, so they can give it to their kids, so they can give it to their kids. Warren Buffett says that if the best stock for him is a stock he never has to sell, ever. So you just go into investing with that mindset. I want to buy things that I would never sell, because guess what? You buy Cresco at, let's say, $10 today. 20 years from now, let's say it's at $500, right? And now you have 100 shares. Right? That's 50 grand, right? And then you've been accumulating that, right? Let's say you had 1,000 shares. That's 500 grand. You can now take that $500,000 worth of stock. You can borrow against that and go buy a house for 3-4% interest. So now instead of you having to go buy a house for $300,000, you literally use the stock you bought and you accumulate it as an asset, and borrow against that at a very low interest. Well, now at a low interest rate, but I don't know, who knows where it's going to be.
The lowest the market's ever been was when the Great Depression hit. Each year since then, if you look at the market, even with all the fluctuations and the ups and downs, and everyone's like, oh, the market's doing bad, oh, it's doing good, it always goes up. It's not a straight line. There's some curves there, but it's always upward going. And that's like the point of investing. The only thing I would say is, if you're investing, invest a little bit every month.
Yeah, exactly.
Because you want that compound interest. You want to continually build on what that investment is. And that's not something that you see the benefit of in 6 months or even a year, but 5 years, 10 years, which, as we all know, goes by real quick. You will see that benefit.
So should you find, I feel like some companies are no-brainers, like Apple.
I'll say right there.
Yeah.
There's no company that's not a no-brainer.
No.
Every company, because think about, so Kodak was a no-brainer 20 years, 30 years ago, right? Xerox was a no-brainer.
And now they're dead.
Right.
R.I.P.
So markets, especially, you have to be careful with these big, huge behemoths, these huge multinational corporations, because if they have bad management and they don't pivot, that's then they're dead in the water. Now, if Microsoft didn't pivot, in the early 2000s, then they would be bankrupt, right? But they pivoted to compete with, like 2021. Oh, they pivoted. So, and this is kind of getting off topic a little bit, but so Microsoft, what happened with them? They got into an antitrust lawsuit with the DOJ in the early 2000s, much similar to what's going on right now with Facebook, Alphabet, Apple, and then what's the thing? Google and Netflix, Amazon. Yeah. So they're all getting investigated by DOJ, which means they have to spend money to fight these investigation, the charges, right? And so you're spending resources and time that takes away from you being able to grow, right? So now imagine you're getting investigated by the government for being too big, and you want to go buy another company to get bigger. Like, these people, it's kind of on pause. That same thing happened to Microsoft in the early 2000s, which allowed companies like Apple to thrive. Because Microsoft was hamstrung, they couldn't really get off the ground like they wanted to. They couldn't really invest in that growth, and so that allowed Apple to thrive in the early 2000s. Hence, that's why they were able to recruit the best talent. They were able to buy some of the best companies, small startups, and then 5 years later, here's the iPhone, 2007, right? And then Google's way behind because they were hamstrung by that. Now, and that's important because there's no no-brainer, but there are safer stocks, right? The bigger ones tend to be a little safe. Safe means less risky. Right, and so you have less risky stocks, but again, that's why it's important to buy a broad basket of stocks.
And that's where we get into our ETFs.
Right.
What's that stand for?
Yeah. Exchange traded funds.
Your mutual funds.
Yes.
Okay, I was just about to ask.
Your mutual funds.
Exactly.
You're talking about investing every month.
Mm-hmm.
Are you talking about doing your own research and figure out where you spend some money every month, or just like a mutual fund?
You can do mutual funds every month.
Yeah,
All right,
it's easier
how
if it's a
do you
mutual fund.
pick which one to
So in my case, what I do is, I opened up my own Schwab account, because Schwab you can manage yourself, and there's another one, I think Ameritrade.
Ameritrade, TD Ameritrade.
Yeah, you can manage yourself. And so what I do each month is I do what they call buy the market. So there are two things, your DIA and your SPY are the two like symbols on the New York Stock Exchange. They're like,
DJIA.
no,
DJ?
it's DIA.
DIA?
Yes, it is DIA, get it together.
Dow Jones Industrial Average.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
DG. Okay. Wait,
Oh,
yes.
oh, okay.
Dow Jones.
Keep it up here. But the point is that they are baskets of mutual funds. So each month I buy a couple of shares. And each month I just keep doing that. Now, a share right now on average for those two runs right now $200, $250 a share or so. So each month I buy a couple. It's like a couple here, a couple there. It might not be both at the same time, depends on what my money's doing that month. But I do it consistently every month because there's compound interest on top of that. And that is literally just a basket of mutual funds, like little pieces of stocks of all the companies on the exchange.
And so with an ETF, I mean, it's gotten so sophisticated now and so granular that you can literally buy an ETF based on metal machinery. Like, what are the top 10 metal machinery companies? And you can buy, if you're really bullish means if you really think they're going to do well, then you can buy that basket. Or I really think that precious metals are going to do great. You can buy a basket of precious metals and see how that goes. I really think that, I don't know, consumer goods are going to outperform the market. And so you can buy a basket of consumer goods.
So you can be specific.
Yeah,
I just picked the generalized ones.
There are several. There are several
Can you
ETFs.
have like something like Schwab or?
Yeah, so now, yes, you can, and there's a few on the Canadian Stock Exchange as well.
Yeah.
Because
Let me tell you the names of them.
TD Ameritrade and I believe and Schwab and all the bigger brokerages, they allow you to actually buy stocks from other exchanges as well. So, but there's a wheat one.
So when you buy that basket, then like Ameritrade or whoever, they're picking for you?
So that particular group of ETFs that I mentioned, that's literally like a little piece of all of them on the market, everything. That's not me looking for a specific mutual fund with a specific goal. Like I'm not looking at a mutual fund group for marijuana. I'm not looking at a mutual fund group for consumer goods. I'm looking for the one that includes all of them. I want a little piece of all of them.
So the legal structure of that, and this is for general purposes. Imagine there's I start a huge company, right? So I have $1 billion, and now I go buy 10 stocks or 20 stocks of every single company in the S&P 500. So I buy 20 stocks for 500 different companies, and now I have a basket of them, and I sell a little piece of my company to you, and so you buy a sliver of my basket.
So they're essentially looking for you.
Right,
You
exactly.
don't have to
Pick
do
it.
the research.
Right, exactly, and you pay a small fee for that.
Okay.
Yeah, you pay a small yearly percentage fee, and that gives you the returns. And then they have stuff where you can buy dividends, and dividends give you monthly income or quarterly or yearly income. So they have specific stocks for that. There's entire strategies where people just buy stocks for the dividends. So for example, if you're if you're wealthy, you have $10 million, and you just want to buy maybe you want to buy GE or I'm not sure who gives the best dividends right now, but let's say GE gives like a $3 dividend or something, $2 dividend every quarter, and so you buy, I don't know, 50,000 GE stocks, and so now you get $2 times 50,000 every quarter. You're making $100,000 every single quarter. You don't really care what the stock does because you just want your money.
You want your dividends.
You want your dividend, and so that's kind of a strategy that wealthy people use to, like, if you're not even wealthy, if you're retired with $5-10 million, and you want to buy stocks that have high dividend yields, and so now you're just getting paid. Yeah, you don't really care what stocks moving. You don't really care about that as long as they don't go bankrupt. As long as they keep their dividends going, obviously. But then you rebalance at the end of the year. But those are different strategies you can use.
So one of the good cannabis ETFs is called YOLO.
Called what?
YOLO, YOLO. That's a pretty good cannabis ETF. Most of the cannabis ETFs, I think, just came out over the past few months.
Yeah, like 6. Yeah, I
don't even think it's been 6 months. So they're all fairly new, but it creates a bundle of the cannabis companies. So if you don't want to look at a specific one, now it's like if you want to look at specific ones, there are specific ones that are doing better, but understand because this market is so new in this country, there is a significant amount of fluctuation.
Right, and so let's talk about cannabis investing for a little bit, right? Yes.
So is YOLO on the New York Stock Exchange?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's not a Canadian stock exchange.
No, YOLO's on the New York one because I got it on Robinhood.
Okay, yes, that's where we go. Okay. So let's talk about investing in cannabis and cannabis stock. This is kind of new. So cannabis is just like any other consumer, like new consumer good, right? It's kind of it's new. It's not proven yet. We think it's going to go do really well. No one knows how well it's going to do. So the thing about cannabis is there's multiple ways to invest in it. Right? You can invest in the actual flower, you can invest in the production, you can invest in the logistics, you can invest in the banking, you can invest in people literally selling debt to cannabis growers. And debt, so don't just think about buying buying stocks from companies that make the cannabis, but actually buy the stocks of people who service cannabis. Who's cleaning the floors of every cannabis company? By that stock. Who's providing the fertilizer? What companies are supplying the lamps to grow your in-home? Start thinking about that stuff.
Because if you think about things like that, and if you think about things like that in almost every industry, then you will always find a company that's providing a service that is necessary. So when I first started looking at stocks, I was like, well, I'm in medicine. I only want to look at medical stuff. And then people were like, oh, so are you investing in pharmaceutical companies? I was like, no, I'm investing in the place that makes all the IV fluids for the country. Why? Because everyone needs saline everywhere. So you invest in the things that people need. So I started looking up who are the companies that produce our gloves for sterile fields, and our gloves when we don't want to touch someone because they're sick and they nasty, and I don't want to get sick. No offense. But you look at things that people need. Who's putting out the pads that go on the hospital beds when someone makes an accident? Who makes those?
Right.
So when you look at that, you don't always think about investing in a company like Alphabet that owns Google, where the shares are like $1,500 for one share. Because I'm not going to necessarily get as much bang for my buck as soon as I want by doing that. But if I invest in the things that people need, then I get more money down the line.
Right.
Wait, and this is you investing in individual stocks?
Yes, this was individual. This is when I was first looking up stocks and trying to figure out, okay, so what should I invest in? First company I invested in was 3M. I was like, everyone needs tape. We still use tape. I was like, who makes our adhesives for certain things? So that's why I started looking at, because I realized in my mind, I was just like, well, it doesn't make as much sense to me down the line to invest in like the quick thing and invest in an Apple. I don't really have Apple money for just one share. I want to invest in a thing that you need right now. I want to invest in the company that makes the plastic bottles for Nestle Pure Water.
That's called investing up and down the value chain. And so this is what the bigger companies do. So they go and they say it's exactly what they do. So like literally on Wall Street, my job was to find these companies. Like who makes, I don't know, who makes the heat, the heating, whatever, to melt this, smelled to glass.
Oh, for the glass,
yeah.
For the melting?
Yeah,
oh, God only knows. Okay, fine.
Who makes that
Smelting's a word? Okay.
Like who makes this, right? And so you go and you find the suppliers for them, and you see how well they're doing. How strong are their contractual ties, right? How strong? What's their relationship like?
Right.
How many vendors do they actually provide for? So that's if you want to. And typically it'd be a smaller company, maybe regionally managed, right? And the stock may be $7, $8. It's easier to double an $8 stock than an $80 stock. So in 1 year, if they get the right, if you notice that, if everyone's gonna start growing weed, and I figure out they have the #1 light bulb, and they say all of a sudden now they IPO at $5 a share, and if they can get, a lot of different contracts for all these other states, and everyone's gonna buy their light bulb, you just made, you move from 5 to 25 in a year, right?
And that's a company that their shares are probably not as much as a Google or as an Apple or as a Microsoft. That's something that you can afford and not necessarily feel like you missed out on something because you chose to do this.
How do you research that? Like, who did the likes? Like, that's not listed on their website.
No, you Google.
Yeah. So
I Googled.
Google the
I can
company,
give-
and it's gonna have somewhere like, hey, this is who we buy our likes.
I literally, so in my case, when I was like, okay, who makes all the IV fluids? I started Googling who are the producers of saline and different types of dextrose fluids and infusions. And then I got a list of companies. And then it was like, okay, well, how do you all package it? Who puts the plastic? How do you get the plastic to put the fluids in? And if you start, honestly, when I started Googling, because it's not like it's private information, it's part of it is thinking about what questions to ask. Because I think the problem is a lot of people get into investing and you think about the big companies because those are the names that you see on TV, those are the names you hear on the radio, those are the stuff that you see on social media and things like that. Oh yeah, I want to invest in Nike, I want to invest in this. But if you start thinking about, okay, so this is a really cool company, I like this. So what are shoes made out of? So where do they get their resources for that?
Who drive the trucks to get them resources?
And you start just asking those questions, you can find those companies because it's not private information. No one's thinking to invest in those companies though. But that's a solid investment that will continue to grow because that is a need that people have.
Right. And that now, if these individual stocks, they shouldn't comprise like all of your portfolio, but you know, there should be a small piece of it, maybe 10, 15, 20, depending on your risk tolerance, and you kind of go after these more riskier, smaller stocks. And I'll give you a real life example. So I was on the case at one of my past jobs, and it's a $1 billion company, and they wanted to know, billion, be a $1 billion company. They want to know how to spend a few $1 billion, and part of my
apparently
job,
no one knows how to do that. I'm sorry.
Part of my job was to figure out, okay, you know, we were looking at the defense sector, right? We're looking at fighter jets, and we're looking at the components for fighter jets, like the radar components for fighter jets. Now, I didn't know that a radar is called a microwave component. I thought a microwave, so you put some food in, press 3 minutes, and then it up.
Well, no, I get microwave waves. I just wouldn't have thought about all that.
So microwaves, there's a little thing in a jet, and it's in the radar. Each have their microwaves. Each microwave is made up of tiny, tiny subparts. So it's my job to figure out who makes these subparts, and there's thousands of people, right? Because we weren't trying to buy a stock, we were trying to buy companies. So it's a little different, but same thing, but like a little different. but just the same rules.
A little
apply,
aggressive.
Right? The
Just
same
a
rules
little bit
apply.
more
So
aggressive.
we're not trying to buy. No, you guys aren't trying to buy 100% of this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, trying to acquire them and absorb them. You're trying to buy, you know, a couple shares, right? But if you know, okay, who's making the microwave components that go into the new 747 that Boeing is going to create, and they have a contract for 10 years. Oh, you're good, and they are a great company. They're either going to get rolled up into a bigger company, or they're going to get and attract more contracts. Right. Obviously, there's a risk that they can just fail and, you know, not perform. But if Boeing trusts them, you know, that's at least a positive sign, right? Or if a bigger company, if a bigger company trusts them, then that's kind of a stamp of approval. Not saying that it's perfect and it's going to work out, but that's some evidence you can use when evaluating which different stocks to go after.
Right. So it's like, for me, it's like I'm in an intensive care unit. I have people on machines trying to sustain life. It's like, okay, so Draeger makes one of my ventilators. Okay, they make the ventilator, but who makes the plastic tubing that connects to the ventilator that I need to connect to the endotracheal tube to keep the patient alive? I want to invest in that company. Let me look up that.
I'll give you, let's do some brainstorming right now, right? So, and we talked about this as far as vaping. So vape, the hot new thing is like vaping, right?
That's not going to last long, sorry.
Right, no. Right. So vaping is not going to last long because like people are literally dying. And I asked a doctor friend of mine, you know, what's going on in the hospitals, and she said people are coming in with like collapsed lungs at 25, you know, 22 years old with, you know, infections or lung disease, and that's not going to last long, right? So you look now and Juul, I think, is being investigated, right, by the government, and then you see the people who own Juul, the parent company, I think it's Altria, maybe? Altria, they own Juul, which also owns Philip Morris. So they all are, their stock, you can envision that their stock's gonna go down in the near future. But then you think about, okay, let's think about, and this is just me brainstorming right now, I haven't thought about this, so I'm asking you guys, let's think about if you have kids getting sick or getting lung disease or getting lung, what would you call it, collapsed lung?
So respiratory failure.
Respiratory failure.
We'll just say respiratory failure.
What medicine would you typically administer to those people?
They're just gonna die because they don't have an infection.
So right. So they don't necessarily have an infection. The fact that now there are going to be more people admitted to hospitals with respiratory failure who are younger. So what machines are we going to be using? What medications we're going to be using? There's going to be a lot of albuterol nebulizer treatments being given. So who's making the albuterol? So who's making the packaging that the albuterol comes in?
Because the stock market is all about supply and demand. If you can anticipate when the demand is going to increase and you start seeing these correlations, you can go in and say, okay, I anticipate that albuterol, companies will have higher demand. Therefore, they're going to go to call their suppliers like, yo, we need like 1,000 more of these a week.
Then there will be more tubing and more supplies that you need for ventilator management. So then there's going to be more demand for that. So you just have to think about, okay, so what are people going to need for this?
Right. What is the demand? Just
right.
Beyond Meat. Beyond Meat is doing so well because the demand is increasing due to contracts they've gotten from, or I don't know if they got the McDonald's contract, they're talking about.
They didn't get the McDonald's, but they have Subway and they have Burger King, and they're the Beyond Meat. So they're the only like vegan meat company that is publicly traded right now on the market. The other one is Impossible Burger, but Impossible Burger is private. Right. But Impossible Burger, I think, is trying to make a relationship with another fast food company. Yeah. But if you look at, okay, Beyond Meat's making a relationship with Dunkin' Donuts was the other one. Subway is the other one.
This one today.
Epic Burger.
Oh.
Epic Burger,
yeah. They have like a few locations in Chicago. And I went in there and they have like a Beyond Meat. And I asked the girl at the cash register, I'm like, do you like this? She's like, nah. Nah. I'm like, okay.
But you look at it for the fact that the new trend, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing, being vegan and vegetarian is actually very good from a medical perspective. However, okay, look, stop it. Shh. Hush. But a lot of the meat substitutes from a health perspective are not necessarily beneficial. However, people like having options when they go to these fast food places.
I know, I like it. Okay.
Keep it up. Cutting up in the corner. But so I say that to say, when you look at a company like that who's gone up and down within the market, you look at the fact that, okay, there is a demand for this. People who are vegan and vegetarian want to be able to go to a fast food place and order a burger without it being a burger. So now this gives them an option. I didn't say it tasted good. I've never had that before. I like Impossible Burger better if you want to be particular, but they're still private.
Yes.
I have a question.